Hey everybody, today is Friday, September 12th, 2008, and you're listening to the episode number 72 of On Tap, a video game podcast. I'm your host, Dale Koulis, and alongside me today is a very, very special guest host, and this is kicking off something very special here. This is our very first part of a multi-part RPG special where we're going to try and cover as many generations of RPGs on as many platforms as possible. And to start things off, I have with me no other than Mark Singer of the PS Nation podcast. Welcome, man.
Thanks, man. How's it going?
Oh, it's going well. It's new Metallica day, and I can't wait to throw that thing in. I got to go and rebuy it so I can get the Guitar Hero download code with it. I didn't want to at first because it was more money, like $20 more, but then I realized I got like a $5 reward zone card, so I'm just gonna be a pushover and take the plunge.
Ha, there you go.
So, no, I'm real excited about doing this RPG show. We got a lot of good stuff talking about. For this installment, we're gonna be talking about RPGs we played and our thoughts and our memories of the games, and a little bit of a history on the genre as well. On the Nintendo and the Master System and the TurboGrafx. So that's what's on the agenda for today. But before we get to it, as we start off every show, Mark, what games have you been playing lately?
Oh man, you gotta ask that question, huh?
Of course. Well, it wouldn't be a video game podcast without that question.
Well, I've been playing quite a bit lately since I've been jobless for the last 2 weeks. Haven't played quite as many video games as I wanted to since, I actually had to hunt for a new job, but I've been playing what I can. On topic, I've been playing Ys Book 1 and 2 on the Virtual Console. That's the TurboGrafx CD port. Great game, and I'll talk about that a little bit later.
Awesome.
And that kind of inspired me to go and play Ys 4 for the Super Nintendo. Is emulation a dirty word on this podcast?
Oh no. We don't
Okay.
We don't condone it, and I'm sure yours are perfectly legit backup copies. So.
Oh, of course. I mean, because emulation is like punching babies.
Yes.
Yeah, but I've been playing the fan translated version because it was only released in Japan. But I never played that version of it, so playing Ys Book 1 and 2 inspired me to go play that one as well. Other than that, a little bit of Disgaea 3 on PS3.
Are you up to level like 25,000 characters now?
Nah, I kind of gave up and sent it back to GameFly.
Oh no! Already, wow.
It's a great game, but I seriously just do not have the time to devote to it. And really, I hate to say it, but there is absolutely no reason that should be on PS3.
Yeah.
I've caught some flack on the forums for that already, but really, the graphics are PS2 quality and just upscaled onto the PS3, so they actually look really bad.
Heck, most systems out there have the backwards compatibility, so people can just play it with upscaled anyways.
Yeah, and supposedly the reason that they put it on PS3 is because the PS2 couldn't crunch the numbers, and they wanted to do like downloadable content for the PS3. I guess I can buy that a little bit, but
just see how they deliver, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks lazy. I know they said they were going for the nostalgia angle, but it could have poked more fun of it at itself for that, and it doesn't. Like, the story's good. The story basically is just poking fun at gamers and otaku in general. But I would have liked to have seen, like, a few jokes, actually poking fun at how the game looks.
Man.
There wasn't. Sorry, I'm being really negative about it, but the game is good. It's just as good as the past. Disgaea is probably better. It goes way more in depth with all the stuff you can do as far as a strategy RPG goes. And for that, I definitely would recommend it if you're a fan. But if you've never played a Disgaea game before, just don't expect it to take advantage of your PS3 at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. But I guess, in the end, it's just kind of like pretty much what, it's the content that counts.
Exactly. And, it's not to say the art's bad or anything. Like, the portraits are great. The character sprites are well drawn. They're just low res. but the voice acting's good, the music's good, so it's a good package. Just don't expect anything next gen about it.
Okay, cool.
But other than that, a bunch of Mercenaries 2 on PS3.
Oh, okay, good deal. Did you completely knock that out yet?
Well, I haven't played enough of it to finish it, and the downside is there seems to be some sort of glitch in some people's PS3 versions where they can't connect to anybody online, and I happen to be one of the people suffering from that, which really sucks, because I wanted to play this in co-op online.
Yeah, online co-op sounds like the way to play.
Yeah, and it's fun as hell and single player too, but I can't connect to anybody, and it's really kind of ticking me off. But apparently, EA is aware of this, and they're working on a patch. So hopefully they get that done soon. But the game itself it's glitchy, it's not great, but it's so much stupid fun. I'm having such a blast with this game, I can't even tell you.
Explosions.
It is worth a rental at the very least.
Yeah, and I believe you guys for listeners, if you guys want to hear more about Mercenaries 2, you guys just reviewed it on one of your latest episodes of PS Nation.
We sure did. I think that was episode 77.
Yep, and yours truly makes a cameo on there. Yep, so.
Yeah. Hey, I'm happy to return the favor and guest on your show.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm sure a lot of the listeners newer listeners are probably found out about this podcast from there. So if you guys are sticking with us still, thank you for giving us a shot, and just hope you like what you hear.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm sure I've been playing other stuff. I tend to forget. I've been playing a little bit of Final Fantasy Tactics on PSP.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the remake, right?
Yeah. It's good. I like it a lot. The new translation is fantastic. A lot of people complain about the slowdown that was, not added, but a problem in this version. But it doesn't really bother me. It kind of happens when there's special effects going on, like spells and whatever. But, I don't know. It hasn't detracted from the experience at all for me. The new translation and the cool-looking cinema scenes really make up for it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And I know one of our other regular co-hosts that couldn't make it on today, Chris, I remember he told me Final Fantasy Tactics on PS1 is his all-time favorite game. He says he actually literally spent a few hundred hours playing that game.
Oh yeah, I did too. That was it's in my top 10 of all time for sure. It's my favorite strategy RPG. So it's kind of funny that Disgaea 3 actually sort of inspired me to pick up the Tactics remake finally and play that.
Is Cloud Strife still in there as a hidden character?
He is, and they added the main character from Final Fantasy Tactics A2 on DS. He's hidden in there now, and I think Balthier and the chick with the rabbit ears from Final Fantasy 12 are also in it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, so they added some new stuff. So it's, and there's the new cinema scenes that look fantastic. Because they're all hand-drawn. Well, I think they're 3D, but they look hand-drawn, kind of like the regular graphics do.
Have a very distinct feel, pretty much.
Yeah, they're very cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else you've been playing, or that rounds it up?
That's about it. Oh, a little Castle Crashers and Samurai Showdown 2 on Live Arcade.
Oh, sweet.
But, yeah.
I didn't even realize Samurai Showdown was out on Live Arcade.
Yeah, it came out this past week, and it's 800 points.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and up until the day the day before it was released, I think they were still listing it as 400 points on the website.
Oh, that's...
And then all of a sudden it's 800.
And considering you can find that on a bunch of collections too, I think, right?
Not yet, but it was released on Virtual Console, and it will be on the Samurai Showdown Anthology that should be out next year, I think, on PS2 and Wii.
Is it on SNK Arcade Classics?
No, the first Samurai Showdown is.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is the second one.
Presumably, if they make a part 2, then that'll be on there as well.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, it's one of my favorite fighting games, but for 800 points, it's the same as the Neo Geo game. You just got your arcade mode and then online multiplayer. No training mode. 2 options for the graphics, either pixelated or with that ugly filter that they put on Metal Slug 3. And then that's it. There's no moves list or anything in the game, so it's really bare bones for 800 points. The only reason I even bought it is because I had some extra points laying around from that Target sale from like a month ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I missed out on that. I should have stocked up. Usually I try and get a few of them and just...
So, I haven't actually tried it online yet. I should do that.
Cool.
Since that's, the reason I bought it.
All right, well, for what I've been playing, it's been pretty short. Pretty much, my gaming week has only consisted of just the very first day of this week because I just finished up my class and work week, and just a busy week. I haven't had that much time to do much gaming, but I did actually had a few buddies over, and we kind of dusted off the N64, and a few times a year we'll play WWF No Mercy on there, which I still consider to be like my all-time favorite wrestling game. And the gameplay still holds up well to this day. I still think it's the wrestling game that plays the best to this day easily. That game was just a blast to play. We did some really, really intense triple threat Iron Man matches, so that's always fun. And then we actually threw in Mario Kart 64, and I don't know which is your favorite Mario Kart, but Mario Kart 64 is still my favorite. I think it has the best track design.
Yeah.
And just the way, just kind of like the pacing too, and the weapons. It was kind of before the weapons kind of seemed to get out of control with all the crazy power-ups and unique things that are in the new ones.
That's my favorite, partially because that was the one that was out when I was in college, so we had so many nights where we just sat and drank and played Mario Kart 64 all night long.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a blast with it. I don't want to sell Mario Kart Wii short. I really only played it just probably maybe no more than a dozen races, so maybe that one will grow on me as I get a chance to play it more down the line. But
I have it, and I haven't played it since the week I bought it.
Oh, no. I remember doing some battles in Mario Kart Wii, and the battles seem to actually be kind of cool because you can actually have up to, I think the full roster of characters.
Yeah.
So, I don't
know.
You
have to have teams. That's the only problem with the battles. You can't do one-on-one.
Give me a big free-for-all.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's not bad, but I didn't like it as much as the past Mario Karts.
And then other than that, right after that, I think I played all night that night. I had another friend come over, and we picked up our Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance campaign on original Xbox. It's kind of a game we hit up and revisit every few months, and we're getting towards the final stretch of that, I think. Did you play Dark Alliance at all?
I did a little bit, but not too much.
Okay. Because we're hitting the part where we're in Act 3, we're hitting the Onyx Tower, and I did check a guide just to see how our progress is, and it looks like we only got maybe 2 main boss battles left, and we can't use recall potions, recall back to town to cash in all our loot for potions anymore, so it's really getting challenging now and really picking up, so we're hitting the final stretch, and I love my hack and slash game, so I can't wait we plan on starting Dark Alliance 2 up right after that, so yeah, that's fun. That's pretty much all I've been playing, so.
Wow. I trounced your game playing this last week. Huh?
Yeah, well, hopefully I'm taking a bus down to go down to the Twin Cities there and back, so I'm planning on catching up on a lot of DS action here on the bus ride there and back, so. Hopefully I'll finally get around to giving Hotel Dusk some due time.
Cute.
All right, so let's roll into the things here. I wanted to originally start things off by doing a lot of discussion on the early PC years of talk there. I got a couple things on the history of the genre because that's where it really kind of picked up here. We had a third host lined up to make it on, but we had troubles reaching him, but if I still am able to get a hold of him tonight, I may record a supplement part to this podcast and edit it on at the end, but if I don't, I'll try to get it on sometime down the line there, because he's played a lot of the old school PC RPGs, but I can give a quick little history of it. Mark, I don't know, were you familiar with when these games were coming out, in the early 80s, kind of with the old school Ultima and Wizardry games?
I knew of them, but my family didn't even really have a computer until the 16-bit systems were out. So what I knew of them, I basically played at friends' houses. So I didn't really get to play a whole lot of them.
I see. Yeah, that's kind of like how I was too. I knew they were out, and I remember seeing a few of them even get ported to the NES. I remember seeing a couple of the Wizardry games and the Ultima games, and I remember looking at the wireframe graphics, and they just seemed kind of crude at the time, and just hearing other people talk about them. Yeah, you make your own graph paper, you follow your way out through the dungeons. I'm like, what? That doesn't sound that much fun. But I never really gave I never really gave them a fair shake. But it's the way other people described them just didn't sound that enthralling for me.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like how the genre originated in on video game form. Actually, even going back a ways a bit, I was actually reading the Guinness Book Gamers Edition that came out this year, and kind of found some interesting information in that. And I guess right around the time when Dungeons and Dragons really took off in the mid '70s, I guess programmers at universities they had their own text-based online games going of Dungeons and Dragons going in the mid '70s, just a few years after Dungeons and Dragons really took off.
Wow!
And of course the install base for that was very, very limited, and I think like you can only do one-on-one at the time when it first happened, and that's how a lot of the old kind of like interactive computer game RPGs really took off, was just kind of through like text-based. I think as they became later known as kind of like MUDs. I never really got into any or really kind of dabbled in that kind of art. I did kind of watch some other people play them before, but that wasn't really for me. Did you ever happen to get into the Telnet or kind of BBS door?
I did a little bit. Like I said, my family didn't really have a computer till the 16-bit days, but I should clarify that a little bit because we didn't have like a modern computer until then. But before that, we had some really old ones that my mom had bought used from work, and I'm talking like all-in-one tiny little 8-inch green and black screen with the screen's built into the body of the computer, and it can all like fold up into like a case. And this stuff was so old, and it needed like boot disks to actually start up. But there was a local BBS in Milwaukee, Wisconsin that a friend of mine joined, and then I ended up joining too, and it had some of those MUDs on there. So we played those a little bit. We never got like real hardcore into it, but we played them for a while. And the ironic thing is, like years later, when I was in high school, I was like 15. I got my first job at a McDonald's, and turns out the manager there was the guy who actually ran that BBS.
Oh wow!
Yeah, small world.
Dang.
But I mean, they were cool. Like the only thing that sucked at the time was the people who were higher level like to pick on the newbies. So, we'd start up a new character and just go get slaughtered, and there was nothing we could do about it.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's kind of like, so that kind of wraps up what we have to say about a lot of like the early PC RPGs. But like I said, if I'm able to get a hold of my other friend who was supposed to make it on, I'll try and add on like a supplement part of the podcast covering that.
Yeah, because there were a lot. I mean, the SSI Gold Box games, like you said, the Ultima games, tons and tons of classic PC RPGs that I just never really experienced.
Yeah. But kind of like that kind of helps transition and seg into like the next part of RPGs, because in games like Ultima and Wizardry, I know a lot of people, it seems like, associate RPGs for kind of originating in Japan, but the very first RPGs to come out in Japan, the Dragon Warriors and like the very first Final Fantasy, Dragon Warriors especially, when that came out in Japan, they had the first-person battles, and those battles were actually inspired by the first-person view of the dungeon crawls seen in Wizardry and in the early Ultima games.
Yeah, and there's actually there's a PC Japanese RPG that predated Dragon Warrior that was actually considered the first Japanese RPG.
Oh, okay.
I wish, I was looking it up, I cannot remember what the name of it was. But I read this article fairly recently, and I think it was like an American GI who ended up like moving to Japan, was a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. So he actually programmed this game on his own, and it was trying to sell it around to Japanese companies, but nobody wanted it. So finally he got a Japanese company to support it. And like they had this whole like ad campaign for it, I think, that was trying to describe it like, or actually, I think the way he sold it was he sat the guy down and tried to explain it like, you are the main character. It's like you make your own, because it was like unheard of there.
Yeah, you are the hero.
Yeah, and he finally convinced the guy, and then they did it, and the thing was just selling out overnight, and that's what ended up inspiring all these others. But since it was just like one dude, working on the game, he ended up eventually getting surpassed by like the Dragon Warriors and Final Fantasies out there. I wish I could remember what the name of the game was though.
I got down here as a date that I think, well, minus that exception, you noted that Dragon Quest was one of the first RPGs as we know them today to hit in Japan in 1986 for the Famicom, that which is the Nintendo we know it as in America. But
Yeah.
and I guess Nintendo did bring that game to America a couple years later, but it sold. I don't know if you remember this, but it sold so horribly that Nintendo ended up giving it away as subscription bonuses for Nintendo Power.
But I was one of the suckers who actually paid $50 for it.
Oh wow! Now, how did you become familiar with Dragon Warrior now?
Well, the thing is, the very first RPG I ever played was actually the Ultima 3 port on the NES.
Oh, okay.
I was at my cousin's house, and we rented this game, and it was like nothing we'd ever played before, like making your own characters, equipping them however you wanted. We were absolutely blown away by it. So we were always on the lookout for something else, and I was a Nintendo Power subscriber, and I remember when they were previewing Dragon Warrior, I'm like, oh my god, this looks amazing. So I got it for Christmas, like the year it came out, and, took it over to my cousin's house, and we played through, like, almost the entire game in, like, a week or something like that, because I don't think the game was that long. But
I
it was
can't remember
amazing for
how
us.
much it was, how long it was. I tried playing through that game twice, but I failed at beating it. The bad thing about NES cartridges in the day, they were the first kind of, I think, games offer like a save function built into the cartridge without a password. And do you remember that you had to hold down the reset button, then turn the power off to have the game properly save? And if you just hit the power off, that it'd actually delete your save if you accidentally were like just kind of in a rush to turn off. And that actually happened to me a number of times. I was very pissed off at that.
Yeah, that sucked.
I thought the cool thing about I played the original Dragon Warrior a lot. 2 times I tried playing it, didn't beat it, but I remember I must have got at least a dozen or so hours into it, both playthroughs. I think the thing that really stood out about for me is just like you said, the amount of customization. Even though at that time you only had one character in your party, you could just the way you can equip and fight in the battles, level up your characters, became more powerful. You had a lot. It just seemed like you're always getting rewarded as the more you played, and just the amount of storyline seemed unheard of for an NES game at the time.
Yeah.
And
those games were amazing, and I think that's what really drew me to RPGs, is because they were so unlike anything else at the time, even if the translations were horrible by today's standards. But
yeah,
back then, what do we know?
And I tried. I think I borrowed the copy of Dragon Warrior and ended up borrowing and giving it back to a friend before I could beat it. And then I actually tracked down the remakes on the Game Boy Color. I don't know if you happen to play those or not.
Yep. I did buy the Dragon Warrior 1, 2, and 3 remakes and played through them on the GBC.
Yeah, I bought them, didn't finish them, put about a dozen hours in almost all 3 of them. I did like that they got rid of the Old English, though, because at the time I didn't mind, but this is so hard to deal with nowadays, it seems.
Yeah, I agree. And, that's kind of funny, because, I was talking about Final Fantasy Tactics before, and they do have more, a Shakespearean twist on the translation now. But it's not as bad as, the old Dragon Warrior games were. So you can definitely deal with it.
No, I remember putting a lot more time in Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. I never played 4, and it seemed like 3 and 4 came out more towards the end of the NES life cycle.
Right.
I don't remember seeing 3. I only remember seeing Dragon Warrior for sale, and that's the only one I can still find to used game shops. I don't remember seeing 2 through 4 for sale anywhere nowadays. It seems. What is there anyone that's your personal favorite?
No, the only one I actually played on NES was the first one, because I never did. Either I had sold my NES for a Genesis. No, that doesn't make sense. I think Dragon Warrior 2 was out before I got rid of my NES. But I just never picked it up for whatever reason. Yeah, I don't think even the local video store had them for rent when they came out. Otherwise, I would have jumped on those. Because I do remember by the time Final Fantasy came out on the NES, I no longer had one. And I was very happy because a friend of mine had bought it, so I could go over to his house and play it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, let's shift gears and talk about Final Fantasy now. We won't be spending a lot of time on each and every game here, but if you haven't noticed already, the format we're going with this is we're just going to be talking about a lot of the games we remembered and playing, just kind of our memories of them and like just the highlights and maybe key evolutionary steps it brought to the RPG genre here. So now we're on to Final Fantasy, and for the longest time, I'm sure a lot of us thought there was only one Final Fantasy game that ever came out for the 8-bit era, and that was not the case. It originally came out in 1987 in Japan, the very first one, but 2 and 3 came out in Japan also during the NES era, or Famicom era in Japan, but we only got the first one in America in 1990, just kind of like when the NES was finishing up its prime time life cycle before the Super Nintendo hit. And I never played it. I remember I had a friend that was really into Final Fantasy, and he loved it, and I ended up picking it up on the PS1 compilation. Haven't gotten around to trying it, which I did. Yeah. You said you played the Final Fantasy on Nintendo?
Only at my friend's house, because I had already sold my NES to buy a Genesis at that point. But I had the free strategy guide from Nintendo Power for Final Fantasy, and man, like I think I actually wore out the binding on that, just like reading through it, because I thought it looked so cool. So yeah, it actually did live up to my expectations too.
You know, like the big thing Final Fantasy did for the genre was it introduced multi-character parties, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then also the party upgrade halfway through the game where you like took on an advanced class.
Oh, okay. And they kind of did a whole new format for the battle screens where you actually saw your party on the character battle screen, and you had a different view of your enemies, and kind of seemed to like it kind of immersed you more into the battles, made you feel more part of the battles. It looked like.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. So would you say Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior? Which was the better one at the time?
I think probably Final Fantasy, just because it was more advanced.
All right, cool.
But I have a soft spot for the Dragon Warrior series.
Yeah, same here. Now, did you ever get a chance to play any of the Final Fantasy 2 and 3, any of the NES translations or anything like that?
I think I had started a fan translation of Final Fantasy 2, but I never got very far. And I've been meaning to pick up the DS version of Final Fantasy 3 for a long time, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah. Were there any other NES RPGs that you remember?
Yep, I got a list here. Some that I played. These aren't really maybe true RPGs, but just some that I think that are worth mentioning that had RPG elements. I think it kind of laid the groundwork for kind of different styles of RPGs we know today. Well, I guess there is one more kind of traditional RPG. I did play the first Mother on NES, which some people may know as Earthbound Zero, the unofficial release.
You bought that at MGC last year, right?
Yeah. I didn't realize it was this company was selling, possibly. Yeah. I don't know if I should say anything.
No, they're basically like bootleg NES cartridges with like fan translated games on them, right?
Yeah, I think they had some loopholes where they worked around some loopholes, so they were able to sell it legally. But
yeah, you can find them on the internet too.
Yeah, so
I think it's cool though because I actually hate playing emulators on like a computer.
Yeah. And, I threw that in NES Messiah. I only got a few hours into it, but, I was surprised for how much they were able to push the power of the NES. I mean, it's not exactly like Earthbound on the Super Nintendo, but, you could see it laid the groundwork. It is like it, but with, like, kind of, 8-bit graphics and sound. There's random battles, but it kind of has a sense of humor and style that, Earthbound's known for. You got the crazy enemies, like, I can't remember the names of the enemies, but if you remember, like, the DJ hippies and the crazy hobos that you encountered in Earthbound, they were just so, out of the ordinary and just laid back take on the genre that it was just so fun to play through. You play as a little kid and this crazy events happening in your town. I think it's almost like Earthbound on Super Nintendo where I want to say a meteor hits your town too, but I think I might be off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, the plot was kind of similar, wasn't it?
Yep. You gotta do the little kids take over the world. I think your first weapon is a baseball bat, so... it was awesome. I need to put more time into it, but... Yeah, so Sweet. Mother, that was supposed to come out on Nintendo, but by the time it was, I remember Nintendo Power listing it as coming soon towards, like, 92 or 93, but by that time the NES was just starting to fade out fast, so I think they just ended up canning it all together.
Yeah, but they had like completely translated it, had they?
Yeah, that's what I heard. That's how. Yeah, I think someone was able to get a hold of the completed game, and that's how kind of the translation made its way around the internet.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so that's Mother or Earthbound Zero as it said on the label.
Yeah.
And
so what other NES RPGs did you play?
Well, I don't know if you want to consider this one, but I got Gauntlet 2, and I kind of consider that as maybe laying the groundwork, maybe a precursor to some of the games like Diablo and Baldur's Gate. Not exactly. It's more like you said earlier before we were recording. They're kind of more actiony. And
yeah. Well, a lot of the RPGs that actually made it over here were kind of hybrids. Like Zelda's not exactly an RPG, but it has elements, so a lot of people actually still consider it sort of an action RPG.
Yeah.
And there are others.
Yeah, they kind of evolved into the RPGs we know them as today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Gauntlet 1 and 2, it had its elements. You could pick classes, and you kind of had a hit point meter kind of thing, and you could carry a limited amount of items like keys and what forth. And there's some story, but I remember Gauntlet 2, that game pissed me off because I think, if I remember right, the original Gauntlet had 100 levels, I think, right? And there's actually an ending to it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But Gauntlet 2, I thought it was the same thing, and I don't know if there was randomly generated levels or if there was just a ridiculous amount of levels, but it had the 4-player adapter, and our family had the 4-player adapter, and we, all four of us, were playing that game for literally a whole afternoon, just determined to get to the end of the game, and eventually gave up. I remember around level 150 something, and then we just gave up. Just, things didn't go our way. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Gauntlet, and there are many other layer entries in this series which I think kind of rivaled some of the other hack and slash RPGs that we not maybe rivaled in quality, but kind of the same style of scope and presentation they bring to the hack and slash RPGs. Yeah. But other NES ones I got here, I didn't play here. I just kind of listed a few. Swords and Serpents was kind of like it was a 4-player game.
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
And there was some of the first-person dungeon crawls I listed that I mentioned earlier, like Bard's Tale and Wizardry in the earlier Ultima games.
I remember playing Wizardry. That was hard.
Wizardry I ended up getting into way later in the series. Like Wizardry 8 I was a big fan of, but I can save that talk for another time. But yeah. I wish I would have gave the earlier Wizardry a shot, but that was another one where you got to make your own graph out the dungeons and all, right?
Oh yeah, that was tough.
Yeah. And that's about all I got. I wrote down Swords and Serpents, Bard's Tale, Mother, Ultima, Wizardry. Is there any others I'm forgetting, Mark, that you got?
I can remember a couple, but some of them were kind of borderline. There was Faxanadu, which was more of an action RPG, and it was side-scrolling, partially platform, but it had a lot of RPG elements to it. And there's one really bad one I remember playing that I had rented called Hydlide.
Oh, yeah, I remember that game getting universally panned, kind of.
Yeah, that was a bad game. The graphics were bad. Ironically, it has a similar mechanic to my favorite series, Ys, where you don't actually attack the enemies, you just kind of run into them. But it was so poorly implemented, and I was so young when I played it, and I rented it, and I didn't realize you had to equip the weapons and armor. So I'd be running into enemies and just dying and getting so frustrated because I didn't know what to do.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that game was awful. And surprisingly, it had 2 later sequels that made it to the US, one on the Genesis and one on the Saturn.
Yeah, I remember hearing about those.
Why.
Did they eventually bring some credibility to the series?
No, but the Genesis version had a fantastic intro song. I remember that much.
For what it's worth.
Yeah, and the Saturn version was a badly digitized RPG. It was awful.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But, that's all I can remember on NES. I had sold mine off to buy a Genesis when that came out, so I didn't get to play a lot of the later games when I think companies got a little braver about bringing more RPG-ish type games over.
Yeah.
And there's Castlevania 2, which is still Castlevania, but has some RPG elements to it. But I don't know if I would consider that an RPG.
All right, cool. Well, let's move on to the other main 8-bit competitor of the era was the Master System.
Oh yeah.
I think I was telling you before the show. Growing up, I don't remember seeing a Master System for sale. I didn't even know of its existence until like when I first, until discovering it in like maybe some video game magazines way on down the road past its era.
Yeah.
But
see, I was at the right age when that came out, when that and the NES came out, because I was just coming off Atari, and these systems debuted, and for whatever reason, I like the Master System a lot more. And
it was a little more powerful, right?
A little bit. You know, like most people probably wouldn't agree, but I think the graphics and the sound, well, maybe not the sound, but the graphics were a little bit better. The Japanese version of the Master System actually had a really nice FM sound chip in it, which never made it to the US, unfortunately, because it actually made the game sound a lot better.
Now, for RPGs on the Master System, the only one, I think the one that comes to mind for a lot of people that are familiar with it was the original Phantasy Star, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. And most people who have played it consider it one of the best RPGs of the 8-bit era, if not the best, and I tend to agree with that because the Phantasy Star series is one of my favorites. But that wasn't actually the first RPG to hit the Master System. The first one to hit the Master System in the US was called Miracle Warriors. It was a port of an old Japanese PC game, and it played similar where you had like a first-person perspective and like a menu-based battle system, but the game really was not very good. And then either the same year or the year after, Phantasy Star finally debuted, and I think that was shortly before Nintendo brought out Dragon Warrior.
Oh, okay. So
I think the only
it was
reason...
actually probably one of the first RPGs to hit America after that.
Yeah, one of the first console RPGs, definitely.
Wow.
I think the reason that we actually ended up getting these kind of games on the Master System is just because it didn't have a great big library, so Sega and Tonka were basically translating whatever they could and bringing it over. Whether or not, it would do well, they didn't care. But they gave Phantasy Star a pretty competent translation, and the game was just unlike anything else. It was just a really weird blend of fantasy and sci-fi, kind of a more mature storyline with death and other things you wouldn't really see in video games. Some of the stuff got weirdly translated, like the healing medicine as burgers and cola. So, yeah, we couldn't escape everything, I guess.
Now, wasn't that game, it was like probably, if I remember from what I've read up on it in the past, it was like one of the, it tried a lot of things that not a lot of other games tried before it. It was like a really huge cartridge, right?
Yeah, it was huge and it was insanely expensive. I think it was around $80 or $90 when it first came out.
Wow.
So I didn't play it then. I actually didn't play the Master System stuff until I got my Genesis, and I got that right when the Genesis came out, and you got the free power-based converter for it, which would play Master System games. So I was able to look out and buy a bunch of cheap Master System games at my local like mom and pop video store, because they had a bunch of used ones. And then going to like a KB retail outlet, they had a whole mess of Master System games for dirt cheap, and that's actually where I got Phantasy Star. So I didn't quite play these in the 8-bit era, but it kind of before the 16-bit era really took off.
Yeah.
But that was quite a find. I mean, the game, it really does still hold up fairly well today. It's starting to show its age, but most of the game was the overhead perspective, but when you go in the dungeons, it actually goes to the 3D first-person view. And for an 8-bit game, it has an insanely well-done scrolling map system. But it's also one of those games where you really need to sit down with some graph paper, especially for the later levels, to try to map out where it was. So that those dungeons got really complex, and they like to throw the little trapdoors at you, so you kept falling down floors.
Oh no, gosh! And I assume, I guess, if you're in the middle of graphing it out and if you hit a trapdoor, that just must have completely messed up your whole graphing scheme.
Oh yeah, and the game was not easy either. So yeah. It was a great game, though. I mean, it really made an impression on me, obviously, and a lot of other people. Too bad more people didn't get to play it.
Yeah. Well, at least it kind of it spawned a lot more successors, and the franchise is still going strong today.
Yeah, in various forms. Now we've got Phantasy Star Universe and a couple new variations of it on the way.
Cool. Was there anything else about Phantasy Star you want to touch on before we move on?
Phantasy Star, not really. There were a couple other Sega Master System RPG type games. One being my favorite series, Ys. Got the first game, Ys 1, got a port to the Master System, and that was the first version of it I actually played. and where I actually fell in love with the series. There's very few games that actually inspired me to sit down and like draw pictures of it or even like sit down and make maps of it, but the original Ys was one of them. And looking at the various Ys ports that are available, the Master System one was actually one of the poorer ports, but it didn't matter to me at the time because I fell in love with the game. Yeah. But other than that, there were a few kind of Zelda clone-ish type games like Golvelius or Golden Axe Warrior on the Master System, but we didn't really see too many other RPGs on it.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, when you mention games that kind of inspire you to make your own maps, the one that kind of comes to mind for me is just kind of like you said, the Legend of Zelda, because I guess it made the mapping system. They kind of already had a mapping system on there, but I'd kind of like, I remember playing it and I'd kind of just jot it down and I actually like study it the night before I go to bed. I'm like, okay, I gotta remember this item's here and this item's there, and when I play it through this next day, I'm gonna make sure to try it differently. And
if I remember right, Zelda came with a map. Yeah. But it wasn't finished. It only had some of the areas on it.
I think it just had the overworld map and not the dungeon maps.
I don't even think the overworld was complete, though, because I remember actually sitting there and drawing in the rest of the map on there as I went.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Man, that was so long ago. I think I did that, but I can't be positive.
Cool. All right, well, let's move on to the last platform we're going to cover in this installment. And I'm sure you're real psyched for this. I made sure. I know the regular co-hosts we have on and don't own have never owned a Turbo or played a TurboGrafx. I got one just last year, and I have a limited experience on it, but I have never played any RPGs on it. But you got a huge TurboGrafx collection, Mark, and and TurboGrafx CD. So why don't you dive right in? What are some of the RPGs that stand out and come to mind right away for the TurboGrafx?
Well, first of all, the one I keep name dropping, Ys Book 1 and 2, is basically the flagship RPG for the system. That was the pack-in game that came with the CD add-on when it came out, and it was pretty unprecedented for its time, because this was long before the Sega CD came out. Like, not really full-motion video, but it had those awesome, barely animated, 80s-looking anime scenes.
Yeah.
I love those things. I mean, that's what made me love those 16-bit games so much. But, it had those, it had full voice, and then
probably really unprecedented for its time, the amount of voice work they had in.
Yeah, and surprisingly, they must have poured some money in this, because how old is that game? It's like 18 years old now or something. Yeah,
getting close to 20 years, probably.
Yeah, and the voice acting in that still actually holds up pretty well today, especially compared to some of the crap that companies put into their games. Yeah. It's amazing. But the game it's one of my favorites of all time, and I can't even tell anybody why. It just is. Like, the developer Falcom has made some of the best game music ever, and this has some just incredible synth rock tunes in it. Like, you just have to hear it to understand it. Like, a lot of it will probably be cheesy to gamers nowadays, but I loved it. I really did. Graphically, it's not the greatest game, because TurboGrafx was stuck somewhere between 8-bit and 16-bit, although, the Turbo diehards swear it was 16-bit. So the graphics are fairly simplistic. It's actually a port of a very old Japanese PC game, and Ys 1 and 2 have literally had, like, over 24 ports to various systems, including, like, cell phones and modern PCs and PlayStation 2 and now the DS, and it's just crazy. Yeah. But these games are kind of timeless. The story is simple, but it's still kind of endearing. Gameplay, it's not like a menu-based RPG. You actually run headlong into your enemies. I kind of call it the linebacker mechanic.
I remember seeing like YouTube footage of it for the first time a few years back, and I was like, wow, that must have been really different for the time.
Yeah. It's just weird, and playing it again now on Virtual Console, which I encourage everybody with a Wii to download it. It's only $8. Come on.
And before that, it must have fetched a high penny on eBay, I bet, huh?
Oh yeah, I think it goes for about 30 to 40 on eBay usually, maybe a little less. But the gameplay is just weird, because you have to run into your enemies, but you have to do it right. You have to do it kind of like off-centered a little bit, so you don't take damage when you hit them. But the thing is, it actually kind of streamlines the gameplay, because you have to grind a little bit in the game, but it makes grinding so easy because you basically just run back and forth, enemies respawn, like as soon as you get off the screen, So you can just find the enemies that give you a decent experience and keep running back and forth until you level up. So, like, you think grinding in an RPG, you're not grinding for hours, you're grinding for, like, maybe 5-10 minutes before you can fight the next boss. It's really weird, and I haven't played many other games that have done something like that. It's just got a very odd balance to it, but it works really well for whatever reason. But, like I said, Turbo's kind of flagship RPG, and personally, I think it still holds up pretty well. I mean, you know, like I said, the music might be a little goofy to modern gamers, but I still love it, and the artwork isn't like Anime Today. It was more like 80s anime, where they had like the bigger eyes and the poofy hair and whatever. But hey, I love it.
That's awesome. And you said Book 3 was also on Turbo, hit the Turbo in US, right?
Yeah, actually, the whole book thing was pretty much solely for the Ys Book 1 and 2. The plot centers around the 6 books of Ys.
Oh, okay.
But only the first 2 games and the 4th actually take place in Ys. The rest of them just kind of follow the main character Adal around on his adventures. So they dropped book from the title for the other one. So Ys 3 did make it on to Turbo CD, and that went from an RPG to like a side-scrolling action game. And unfortunately, it was actually pretty poorly done, because that was also an old Japanese PC game, but they didn't do a good job updating it. Strangely enough, the Genesis port of that is probably the best one. The Super NES one is a little bit behind that, but as good as the voice acting in Ys Book 1 and 2 was, the Ys 3 is like the polar opposite. It has some of the worst voice acting I have ever heard.
It wasn't even like cheesy bad?
No, it's just cringe-worthy bad.
Oh,
it's so awful. But that's kind of offset by it having one of the best video game soundtracks I've ever heard.
Yeah, at least there's something redeeming about it.
Yeah, I'm not joking either. It's worth just buying the disc off eBay to listen to it in a CD player. But the game itself was okay. The Turbo version suffers from really, really bad and choppy scrolling, which hurts it even more since it's basically an action game. Turbo had a couple other RPGs. You had Dragon Slayer, which is more of a traditional RPG, also by Falcom, who developed the Ys games. That was pretty good. It was on CD, had some iffy voice acting, but pretty good music. The Turbo, the Hue card, chip-based games, had a couple. There was Double Dungeons, which was a 2-player RPG, kind of first-person perspective. It was fun for its time, but it hasn't aged the best. And Dungeon Explorer it's more of kind of a Zelda-ish game or Gauntlet kind of game, but you could play up to 5 players in it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember playing it once on I think it was at MGC. They had a bunch of Turbo games with the Turbo Express. I was trying them out. I remember trying Dungeon Explorer just briefly and thinking, all right, Gauntlet clone.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's more fun with a lot of people. I think, did I buy that on Virtual Console? I don't think I did. I own the original Turbo one, because I remember trying to get my wife to play it, and she's like, this is awful.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But Turbo also had Newtopia 1 and 2, which were pretty much straight-up Zelda clones. So, if you consider Zelda an RPG, I guess those are too.
Now you said that Ys 1 and 2 is on Virtual Console. Were any of these other ones, are they on Virtual Console that you would recommend picking up?
Dungeon Explorer, I think, was released on Virtual Console, as well as Newtopia 1 and 2. I don't remember if Double Dungeons was released or not. But Ys 1 and 2 I highly, highly recommend. It's just a weird game, and I think most people would still probably get some joy out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But there's a lot of Japanese-only Turbo RPGs that never made it over here. That was like the RPG system in Japan.
Yeah, the system actually didn't come close to really rivaling the success of Famicom in Japan.
Yeah, it was insanely popular in Japan. One of the biggest ones was the Far East of Eden series. In Japan, it was Tengai Makio, which were kind of tongue-in-cheek RPGs that were like telling feudal history of Japan from the perspective of a Western historian, but like they screwed up all the facts and stuff. So it was just really goofy. I've kind of like muddled through them in Japanese a little bit, so most of it's lost on me, unfortunately. And these were supposed to be released in the US, but the Turbo was kind of doing bad by that time, so they never made it. And Working Designs released a couple games for the Turbo, and One of them was Cosmic Fantasy 2, which was a straight-up RPG. I have it, but I've never actually played it.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Yeah.
And I think that about... Is there anything... I think about wraps it up for the turbo platforms there.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but yeah, that's all I can remember.
And that actually, unless you got any other ones that that are escaping you right now, is there any other ones, any other games that we neglected to mention before that you want to get in here before we close up?
No, I don't think so. I just encourage everybody to go download Ys 1 and 2 on the Virtual Console and actually show people that, Ys is still loved.
If I still had the Wii, I would definitely do it, but unfortunately, I traded mine in.
Yeah, not a terrible choice.
Yeah, no, I still don't regret it, but seeing some of these Wii Classic games, these Virtual Console games, then if the system had a viable storage solution, I would have definitely been stocking up.
They need to do that because I've already been cleaning out the fridge every time I buy something, and I'm so sick of it.
That sucks.
Yeah, yes, I can just re-download them later, but it's a convenience thing, and frankly, I don't want to, when I bought Ys, I actually went to the download, the Wii Shop channel, and, I had 800 points, and I'm like, alright, I can buy it. So I click buy, and it's like, oh, you don't have enough free blocks, go free up some memory. No. So I'm like, are you kidding me? So I have to, back out, go to the menu, figure out what I want to delete to make room for it. It's just stupid.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. There may or may not be, like I alluded to earlier, an additional supplement attached on afterwards, depending on if I get a hold of my other friend later tonight. I may actually just end up releasing it as its own separate episode here within a week or so. But
yeah, or get Unistrike or somebody to.
Yeah, definitely. I'll
type in about it.
Yeah, I may try and get some other hosts on. I'm going to try and get a wide variety of hosts on for this RPG special. So, yeah, next week is going to be all about the 16-bit era, so Super Nintendo, Genesis, Sega CD, maybe some PC era stuff at that time is going to be on there too, so be on the lookout of that. And let's just give them a little bit of a tease, Mark. Name one game that you're just super fond of from 16-bit era RPGs.
Phantasy Star 2 and Phantasy Star 4.
Oh, hey, now that's two games. No.
Yeah, I know. Phantasy Star 2 is one of my all-time favorite RPGs. Yeah, I don't want to get into it too much, but it's an incredible follow-up to the first Phantasy Star and has one of the strangest plots of any RPG I've still ever played. Incredibly bleak and just insane. The ending still sticks with me to this day.
Damn.
Yeah.
I'd have to say Final Fantasy 3/6.
Yeah, that was...
It wants to be known as.
That was another one of my favorites.
Yeah. All right, cool. So be on the lookout for that next week, and maybe, like I said, too, an additional supplement maybe in the middle of the week with the PC era, early PC era RPGs. So thank you all for listening and giving this a chance. But before we go, I know a lot of the listeners here probably heard of this podcast through PS Nation and other VG EVO podcasts. But Mark, for those that aren't familiar with the PS Nation, go ahead and shill your heart out.
Well, PS Nation is the show I co-host with Mr. Glenn Percival. We pretty much cover everything PlayStation related, mostly PS3, but we also cover PS2 and PSP, and occasionally PS1. We do a weekly show. You can find us at psnation.org, or just look us up in the VGEvo.com podcast network.
Yes, which we are also, this show is also a proud member of. We all got forums there. A lot of other great podcasts there to download too, like Interactive Distractions and The Goo, Sisters in Gaming. So,
yep. And you can find us on iTunes too. I always forget that.
Yes. Cool. Awesome. All right. So, and we'll also release future installments. I want listener emails. Look, we're covering the 16-bit era next week. And if you got thoughts too, you want to chime in about your personal favorite memories of 8-bit era RPGs, right away our email address is mailbag@ontappodcast.com. So shoot your emails there about your favorite 8-bit era RPGs or even 16-bit era RPGs, and we'll make sure to read them on our next episode. Get in as many as we can. So, and like Mark said, check us out on the VG EVO Podcast Network. That's where our forums are too. So if you got a comment about the show too, always love to check out feedback. Always fond of that. So please post away. And Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Mark, for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
We will talk to everyone next week.
Bye.